Hi, welcome back to the workshop for episode 5 of the Telecaster refurbishment project, and this time we're going to be preparing and finishing both the body and the neck. Okay, so having got the pickup cavity done last time, and you might also be able to see I've actually recessed out the bottom of this cavity a little bit more to make way for the pole piece screws, so I can just drop that pickup right down as far as I need to. But with that all done, we're actually ready now to start the finishing process. And although this body was grain filled last time it was painted, I'm pretty sure that at least in places I will have rubbed right the way through that. So I'm going to treat this as if it was a fresh build and redo the grain filler. And it also occurred to me while I was preparing for this that I actually grain filled this 11 years ago with this tub of joint filler. So that's how long I've been using this tub, but this is what I'm going to be using again for this build. So I'll get the body out of the way for a few minutes and we'll just mix some fresh filler up. And all this is, it's plasterboard joint compound basically, or I think what might be referred to as drywall mud in America. And it's just a powder. And I'm going to drop some in this jug. Add a little drop of water and give it a mix. Okay, so that's mixed up now to it's not too stiff a consistency, but it's not runny either. As you see there, it holds onto the knife quite well. So just a case now of spreading this onto the body. And for that I'm just going to use this scraper. It's not sharp, it's got a nice clean edge, so I'm not going to put any scratches into the wood with it. And it's literally just a case of spreading it out, making sure it's getting rubbed well into the grain. Okay, so that's the top and the sides done. Just smooth those edges in a little bit. Now you could at this stage wipe this down with a damp rag or a damp tissue to take off kind of the thick of this, but on this occasion I'm actually going to leave this. This stuff will dry hard eventually, but for the first couple of days it's relatively soft. So I'm going to leave this as it is and just sand this flat once it's all hardened off. But I now need to turn it over, and to do that I'm just going to stick a cocktail stick in some of these holes. And that'll just give it something to rest on while I do the back. And there we have the grain well and truly filled. So I'm going to leave this now probably 24 hours. It will dry quicker than that, but I'm not going to get a chance to get back onto this for another 24 hours. So that will give it plenty of time to dry. And then we just need to kind of sand the bulk of this back off again. Okay, so this has been left overnight and it's all nice and dry and hardened off. So I'm just going to start working my way through it and get it all sanded back. Now you might have noticed that these holes are kind of pretty well filled up with the grain filler, but it's not a problem. We can just kind of pick it out as we go along, and worst case scenario is we'll just have to run a drill bit down to clean it out. But that's a job for later on. First off, I'm just going to take a 240 grit pad. I'm just going to put it on a small block. It's actually got some cork on it, so it's a little bit softer. And just work my way around it. And as you can see, it doesn't take long to start getting all of this off. And what I'm aiming for is probably what you can see in this little area, where I haven't got the white patchiness that you can see here, here and here, but you can see the white in the grain. Okay, so that's all sanded now to 240. It's still looking quite white. A lot of that will come off with the next stage of sanding, but it is going to look a little bit lighter until we get the butterscotch colour sprayed onto it. But that will actually help us, because it will help to kind of define the grain pattern a little bit more. Okay, so let's move up to a 400 pad. Okay, so that's the back done to 400 grit as well, looking super splendid. So now it's just a case of working my way around these sides. So that's all of the grain filler sanded back off now. Looking really nice, dead happy with it. I've also taken the time to clean out all the screw holes of any excess filler. So that's all prepped up now, ready for paint, but before we can do that, we need to do a little bit of sanding on the neck. Thankfully, not as much. There isn't actually that much to do in terms of preparation on this neck. It's just really to make sure that any of these little marks that you might be able to see down at the heel here, where there's still a little bit of colour left on it, are removed, and it's all nice and smooth. The fretboard's quite smooth already from where I've scraped it off, and I don't really want to sand this at all if I can help it, because any sanding is going to scuff the frets up, and obviously the frets are going to get oversprayed when I lacquer this, and I'm going to have to scrape it off, and if they're scuffed up, that lacquer's going to stick harder and just make it more awkward. So if there is any cleaning up to be done there, I'll probably scrape it rather than sand it. All right. I'm literally just doing this with a 400 pad because there's so little to do. And that's that done. Didn't take very long at all, but that's exactly where we need it to be now. So there's nothing for it but to break out the polythene and the staple gun, and we'll get everything covered up in the workshop and start looking at getting some finish on this thing. Okay, so the plastic's up on the walls. I'm hoping that this is the last guitar that I have to spray in this manner in the workshop. As I mentioned in a previous episode, I'm going to do some alterations to the shop, and one of those is to make a purpose-built spray booth that I can collapse against the wall when I'm not using it, but will extract all of the paint fumes directly out of the workshop when I am. But anyway, that's for another time. So if we get down onto the mixing table, and we'll start to get some paint mixed up for this thing. And as is quite normal for me, I'm going to be using some nitrocellulose paints to do this job. All of these paints have come from Northwest Guitars here in the UK. They do these little pots of paint which are more than enough to do a guitar with, and they're relatively cheap. They're about £8.50 each. They also supplied the thinners for this as well. For this build I'm going to be using 3 different lacquers. I've got the butterscotch blonde for the body. I've got some clear gloss that's also going to go over the body once it's got the butterscotch on, and I've got some vintage amber which I'll use on the neck, but I'll also then put some coats of clear gloss over the top of that. The reason I'm putting clear gloss over the top is A, to kind of seal it off, but B, it means I can build up a good thick finish without actually having a really deep layer of this butterscotch blonde on, because I don't want to obscure the grain on the bodywood. And it also means that once it's all dried and we're polishing up, I can flat the clear back and polish that up, which A, gives it a much glossier look, but also B, means that I'm not rubbing into the butterscotch finish too much, because there is a chance that you could kind of make it a little bit patchy. I'll be using the same HVLP gun that I've used for my last few builds. Nothing special there, just a very cheap one off Amazon. I've already taken the time to put a new filter under the cup, and I'll obviously filter the paint as I put it into the gun. I generally spray at about 40 psi with that gun. It has made the spraying in this little shed a lot better. There's not anywhere near as much overspray as there used to be, and hopefully once we get the new extractor booth in, that will be reduced to nothing. Okay, let's get some lacquer mixed up. So I'm going to start with the body colour, just mainly because I want to see what it looks like. I'm not going to thin this down too much. I want to put 2 or 3 quite heavy coats on, but stop before I feel that the amount of lacquer I'm putting on is going to obscure the grain. It's always a little bit awkward spraying around the horns and the cutouts on a guitar body, but once you've got that done, it's generally quite straightforward. When I've got a guitar flat like this, I always do the sides first. Give it a good strong coat on the back or the top, whichever's facing up. And then just flip it over and do the other side. As you can probably see there, I'm kind of overlapping by about 50% on each pass, just to make sure I've got a good wet edge that I'm spraying into. Grain is looking absolutely gorgeous. And there we have it with 3 coats, and I think that looks about right. So with the body done, I'm now just going to mix up a little bit of the amber to do the neck with. I won't need a huge amount for this. I've probably done about 4 or 5 necks with that 1 tin. And again, I'm not going to thin this down too much, just so I can get a good strong film on with the first few coats. And if you're wondering, I'm just using a metal scribe in one of the tuner holes just to give me something to steady the neck and to spin it round when I need to. Here I'm just laying down the first of the clear coats, and it's exactly the same procedure as it is with the colour. Do the horns first, and spray around the edge of the body, and then do the flat bits on top. In the end I put 6 coats of clear on over the course of 3 days, thinning the lacquer down progressively as I went along, so the final couple of coats were actually probably about 60 to 70% thinner, and that will hopefully give me quite a nice flat glossy finish, so I won't have to do too much rubbing down. And then just the same process on the neck, but I only gave this 4 clear coats simply because the grain's so much tighter on the maple that you don't need that volume of lacquer to get a nice finish. Okay, so there's the body with its clear coats on. I think that's looking really, really nice. I'm very happy with the colour. I'm particularly happy with the way that the grain is standing out in that, and there is the neck as well. It's a bit hard to tell under these lights because it's washing the colour in the neck out a little bit, but they do really work well together. And the only thing left to do now is to get the decal onto the headstock, but I'm actually going to be using a new brand of decal paper on this one. So I'm going to go away and do a little bit of prototyping with that, and we'll be back in the next episode to cover the process of getting that applied and a few of the other little jobs that need doing before we can start to assemble this thing. Now, I'm not totally sure how that's going to go, so make sure you tune in next time to see how I've got on. But until then, thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.